Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Salt Talk, where we season life with service, affirmation, love, and transformation. I'm your host, Jermaine Alberty, and today we're going to do a two-part series in honor of Make a Difference Day 2025, a day when people across the nation roll up their sleeves and serve. This year's theme is Helping Hands, Changing Lives. Feels deeply personal to me. For me, service started when I was a teenager and I joined the Octagon Club led by a dear friend and mentor, Rosemary Davis Kelly. The Octagon Club is the youth arm of the Optimus Club, and we did food drives, visited seniors, raised money for local causes, and somewhere along the way, we learned that service isn't just something to do, but it's something you become. That experience shaped my mission to help people wake up with purpose and respond to the needs around them with compassion. And today, I get to celebrate that journey with someone who was there from the very beginning, my brother of more than 30 years, educator, mentor, and Houston's own Dr. Bryan Williams. In this two-part podcast, we're going to spend our first part talking about our dear friend, Rosemary Davis Kelly, and then we're going to jump into some other content about the root of service and brotherhood, as well as talk about the SALT model in action. And then we're going to wrap up talking about how we care for self and cultivate connection with others. So stay tuned to this two-part episode of the SALT Talk with Jermaine Alberty. So segment one of this podcast is titled The Roots of Service and Brotherhood. And when I think back to those early Octagon Club days, I remember the command to read, and to lead by our mutual mentor, who later became a dear friend, Rosemary Davis Kelly. She truly taught us so much, and it wasn't always by what she said, but how she lived. In fact, Bryan and I talk about Miss Kelly, I'm telling you, almost every time we talk to each other, because she reminded us the importance of service to others and imparted life lessons that would equip us to be adults who not only make a difference, but literally be the difference. And so it's hard to believe that our friend has departed this earth 20 years ago. I really would say she was an earthly angel. And I have no doubt that she would be so proud of all her Octagon children and what we've accomplished. And she poured so much in us. And I definitely have to thank her daughter, Angelique, for willingly and probably unwillingly sharing her with us. And so what we know is acts of service became opportunities for learning responsibility and what it meant to care about people that we might never meet. And that club became our classroom for life, where we first learned what it meant to serve from the heart. And for me, that's where the essence SALT was born. Service is about presence, empathy, and the courage to show up. But before we go there, I would love for my friend Bryan to share any thoughts that you might have about Miss Kelly, as we affectionately called her, and what stood out to you about her.
Well, Jermaine, thanks for having me on today's podcast. And service definitely is a passion of mine, and actually, servant leadership. I'm a student of leadership, and I'm a student of serving others. But when I think about Rosemary Davis Kelly, Miss Kelly, as you mentioned, who we affectionately know her as, she is just an amazing woman who has had a tremendous impact on my life. And I know you mentioned our intersection with her in the Octagon Club, but actually, my intersection and introduction of her began prior to the Octagon Club work. I met her as a youngster at the Linwood YMCA in the
Mm-hmm.
heart of Kansas City, Missouri.
Yeah.
And that's actually where my service route started from, but we'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah.
I want to just respond to your initial question about thoughts about Miss Kelly and what stood out to her. She was, someone that as a youth you feared, and it wasn't a fear that you were afraid of her. but there was a fear in that you had a healthy respect for her as a person, for her as an advocate of youth, and for her having high expectations of herself and for the youth that she served.
Yeah.
She really believed in providing experiences and exposure and education to underserved and underprivileged youth. And somehow she knew that with those experiences and those opportunities, that that would open the door wide for all of us to be successful adults. And so when I really think about her, I think of her as a second mom,
Yeah.
and she was a surrogate mom. And as you know, I come from a family of nine
Hmm.
with a single mom who raised us. And my mom did the very best that she could with the resources that she had, but she couldn't provide and fulfill all the needs that her kids had. And so God blessed to put in my pathway surrogate mothers and surrogate fathers who were able to fulfill the needs and the desires that I had that my mom could not fulfill. And Miss Kelly was one of those. And so she was just an amazing, positive second mom, mentor, role model. And as you know, we might get into that story of a role motor,
Absolutely.
but just an amazing person who has truly had an impact on my life. And growing up at the Linwood YMCA, I saw her from a professional standpoint. But as you and I both know, that as we became adults, that mentorship really blossomed into an adult friendship.
Yes.
And we got to see her outside of work and outside of working with youth. And she really positioned herself to be our friends and our colleagues. And we got to know a little more about her personally, where we were able to spend time with her family, spend time in her home, spend time outside of the Octagon Club or the YMCA. So, you know, I just think of her as just an amazing woman who's had a positive impact on my life and has helped change the trajectory of my life.
Listen, when you said that she was like a surrogate mom, I agree with you 100%. She was that second mom that you didn't know you needed, but my God, the lessons that she taught us were just tremendous. Now, if I'm recalling that quote, she said, "A role model stands still. Model stands still, but a motor is moving and action." And she didn't want us to be people who just stood still. She wanted us to be about action. And I listen, all the adults that she introduced us to that were doing stuff, whether it was taking us to see the governor of Missouri or a state senator in Kansas or whoever it was, she was
Hmm.
always introducing us to people who she knew would be models for us, who
Yes.
were doing things, who were bought things. So when I came across that the fourth Saturday of October was Make a Difference Day, I was just like, we have to do something to honor somebody who made a big difference in our lives, and that was Miss Kelly. And so I'm so glad you agreed to do this interview. And I was curious about how you became part of the Octagon Club. You met Miss Kelly at the Linwood YMCA, but you was the president of the Octagon Club, and I was the chair of recruitment. So how did you even become part of the Octagon Club?
Well, Miss Kelly, in her professional role, she was the program director for social services at the Linwood YMCA. So she was responsible for providing social services and social services program and youth programs at the YMCA. So in my relationship with her, she always ensured that I was connected and that I was exposed to any and every youth program available.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that was within the city limits of Kansas City. But what I
Hmm.
didn't know is on her own time, she was a part of the Optimist Club. And as you know, growing up, the Optimist Club, she was part of the KCK Optimist Club. It
Hmm.
was a predominantly male dominated service organization
It was.
that catered to men.
Hmm.
And she was one of very few women who busted down the door
Absolutely.
and back in the late 80s and 90s and created space and a seat at the table of that
Yeah.
organization to allow women and women of color to be a part of that organization. And
Hmm.
as you mentioned, the Octagon Club was the youth service organization or the branch of the Optimist Club. But I became a part of that because I did not know that Miss Kelly was a part of that organization and that in her own spare time on the weekends, she was the sponsor along with a good friend of ours, Adrian,
Yeah.
his grandmother, Mary Ann Flunder, who was
Hmm.
also a political advocate and community advocate on the Kansas City, Kansas side. But they sponsored the Octagon Club on the Kansas City, Kansas side, which for those of you who are listening who may not know, there's Kansas City, Missouri and Kansas City, Kansas. But they provided space and a platform for youth to get involved in service and in leadership. And so Miss Kelly introduced me to the Octagon Club and just extended the invitation, and I said yes. And then that opened up the door for us to connect with other like-minded young people who were in a
Yeah.
similar age back bracket,
Hmm.
who went to other schools on the Kansas side that we developed lifetime and long-term friendships with. So that's how I became a part of that organization.
And you said that she invited you, and you said yes. It was hard to say no.
Well, I don't know if it was an invitation as it was an expectation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. One of That's one of the things about Miss Kelly is she brought so many opportunities to us. And every opportunity was something that she knew would stretch us and grow us
Yep.
and really turn us into the men that we became today. That's one of my questions is how do you think that experience of growing up with such a strong role model, as we'll call her, motor. How did that shape how you became the man you are today?
I'll go back to what I said about education
Hmm.
and exposure expands your expectations and just provides you with opportunities. So she did that for me, and not just me, but for lots of young people. So
Yeah.
connecting with her, I'll just list a couple of the programs that I was able to be a part of as a result of her mentorship and leadership. Of course, we talked about the Octagon Club, and that
Yeah.
was a service and leadership organization that really exposed us as young people, high school students, about leadership, about service in our community and giving back. And it really taught us, we had committee work, we had meetings where we had to abide by the Roberts Rules of Order and learning how to run proper meetings.
Yeah.
We
Yes.
had minutes. And so we kind of learned the business side of how to operate in, a formal organization or club through that process. I remember one of the exciting things that we did, I don't know if you remember this within the Octagon Club, is we developed a mentoring program, or she did, and she matched us with middle school students that we mentored and we partnered with. And we were, what she did for us, she wanted us to do that for younger middle school students. And so I remember having a couple of middle school students that while I was a junior and a senior in high school, picking them up, taking them on field trips, visiting with their parents and mentoring them on the side while also going to school full time and also working part time. So that was one aspect of that. And of course, there were many opportunities to go to like conventions or workshops that brought out those leadership skills in us. So that was the Octagon Club was one of those programs. Another program that she exposed me to was a program involving mini bikes,
Mm.
and it was called NYPUM, NYPUM. And they no longer do this, but this was a part of the YMCA. And I'll mention this because there's a hobby that I had, but it was
Yeah.
NYPUM stands for the National Youth Project Using Mini Bikes.
Hmm.
And what this was is that it was an organization where it was sponsored by the Y, and they had a set of mini bikes. And what they did is they targeted young African American males who were teens, and they paired them with adult men who actually rode motorcycles, and they would teach us how to ride the mini bikes. They would teach us how to service them. And then what we would actually do is parades are not as popular as they used to be. But back in Kansas City, when we would have the Thanksgiving or St. Patrick's Day or any parade, we would ride those mini bikes in parades. So that was another service organization that I was part of. And then she also exposed me to an organization called Natural Helpers. I think you
Hmm.
were part of this
Yes,
with us.
yes.
But back in the 80s and 90s, when we were in school, there was a drug pandemic happening. Then there was violence in Kansas City.
Hmm.
And there was an organization, I cannot remember, I think it was the National Organization on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse.
Mm.
And what they developed is a peer helpers program where they train young people to form and create an organization. And we were to educate our peers about the dangers and hazards of alcoholism and drug abuse
Yeah.
through not just, you know, giving presentations or giving stats, but the purpose of that was to develop skits and plays and songs and raps in order to present that information in a fun, creative way to our peers
Hmm.
to educate them about the dangers of of drugs and alcohol. And I'm laughing because I remember one of the poems that I memorized and learned and
Mm.
still even know to this day. It's called My Name is Cocaine.
Oh,
So
wow.
maybe at the end of this, I might recite that. But what that organization did for me, as everything that she exposed us with, you and I are excellent public speakers.
Yes, yes.
And you and I have served in ministry. You still serve in ministry in some capacity. My ministry now is the education sector. But
Hmm.
one of the skill sets that she developed with us, with that program and many others, like the Octagon Club, is she brought out the talent and the gift of public speaking and oration. And I remember as a kid growing up, I was very shy. And I'm still very introverted, but as a kid, I was very introverted, lacked some self confidence. But one of the things that she made us do, and there was an expectation of hers, she expected us and exposed us, like you said, to reading current events, reading information, but also being able to stand and deliver a speech, a presentation, and I floundered many, many, many times and failed and embarrassed myself many, many times. But I credit Miss Kelly, and I attribute my success as a public speaker in being able to get up and stand and deliver confidently in front of thousands or hundreds of people a speech, a presentation, and have the ability to capture an audience and encourage them or inspire them. And all that is attributed to Miss Kelly because
Yeah.
she had the gift and the desire to bring out talents and gifts that we had as kids, and she knew that these were skill sets that were going to enable us to be successful. So that's a long answer to your question.
Listen, it's great because here's the thing about it. We talk about Miss Kelly, for hours on end. And so we
Yeah,
could do a whole podcast just dedicated to what she contributed to our lives. And I remember when there was the epidemic in Kansas City, and I was with her, Alvin Brooks, and a bunch of other leaders. We did this Put That in the Pipe
put
campaign.
down the pipe. Yes.
And I mean, it was an all night long like event, and we was in the basement. I want to say of the YMCA possibly, but Put Down the Pipe campaign. And then when Jesse Jackson came into Kansas City, she pulled me out of school to be at that event where Reverend Jackson was at. I mean, I'm telling you, the
That
exposure.
that's ironic because I mentioned that to somebody today. of course, I work in a school district,
Yeah.
and we had our superintendent student advisory council meeting, and so I had a couple students approach me concerned about an organization or a club being started in their school, and they just
Hmm.
had some reservations about it. And I educated them on our district policy, that we don't have restrictions around clubs and organizations that kids can start.
Yeah.
And we live in this country, and in our country, we honor the Constitution and the First Amendment right for people to be able to express their opinions and beliefs, even if we disagree with them.
Right.
That's the
Yeah.
beautiful thing about living in this country. But I was
Yeah.
talking to their sponsor, or their teacher who brought them, and I told them the Jesse Jackson story, that
Yeah.
I was politically awakened our
Hmm.
senior year in high school, and I said it was 1992,
Yeah.
and Bill Clinton was on the verge of being elected, but Jesse
Hmm.
Jackson came to town in Kansas City, and
Hmm.
he was a part of the Get Out the Vote campaign. And
Yeah.
I remember it. You and I were pulled out of school along with some other of our friends and siblings, and we got to be a part of his entourage
Yeah.
as he traveled from schools to churches to community centers and gave speeches. And I'll tell you, that year awakened
Hmm.
me in such a way that I'll never forget that experience. And that's all attributed to Rosemary Davis Kelly.
All of it. Listen, as I said, we could go on and on and on. I just knew
Yes.
I had to dedicate a portion of this podcast to the
Yes.
contribution that Miss Kelly made in our lives. And so I am so excited that she gave me one gift that I have had uh, for now 30 plus years, and that's our friendship, that
Yeah.
introduction of us, and grateful for it. So I just pray that every young person has an opportunity to have a mentor like Rosemary Davis Kelly. And I think I'm thankful that we have done just that. We have paid forward by what she gave to us to other young people, and I'm so grateful for that. So we are going to move to our next segment, which is the SALT model in action. But once again, we love Rosemary Davis Kelly. We love Angelique. We love her sister Linda, and we are so grateful that they, as a family, were willing to lend her to the world. And so, listen, everybody, I just encourage you to be that mentor in a young person's life, because you never know who they may become in the future. Well, hey, my friends, you have been listening to part one of our episode dedicated to Make a Difference Day 2025. Part one, we featured my good friend, Dr. Bryan Williams, all the way from Houston, Texas, and talked about a friend and a mentor, Rosemary Davis Kelly. Thank you so much for tuning in to that part of the podcast. And listen, it's not over yet. I want you to tune into part two of this podcast dedicated to Make a Difference Day 2025. This is Jermaine Albertine, and you're listening to The Salt Talk.